Jesus Christ loves you, and greater love hath no man. Because of his love, he opens the way. He opens eyes, ears, and minds. Open your heart and experience General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and feel his love. Greater love.
Good evening and welcome to Lead Story. Well, Donald Trump may have changed the course of history on Wednesday when he announced massive tariffs on dozens of nations, calling it a reciprocal move, matching what other countries reportedly charge the United States, even taking into account non-tariff barriers like value-added taxes and other such charges and measures. And as we look at the implications of these tariffs, it's important to understand their impact, not just on the U.S. economy, but also on global trade relations, consumer prices, and industries across the world. Today on Lead Story, we'll explore the lasting effects of Trump's tariff policies and how they continue to influence international trade and politics. Welcome to Lead Story. I'm Nika Lewis, filling in for George Davis. So if you've missed my intro just now, that we are talking about the crux of the matter we're discussing this evening. It's all about tariffs that have been imposed by the mighty U.S. So if you're joining us, you're here for a little bit of information on that and more.
Promises made, promises kept.
Well, he said it and now he's doing it. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump issued an executive order to regulate imports with a reciprocal tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to large and persisting imports into the United States. Beginning April 5, a universal 10% tariff will be imposed on all imported products to the U.S., a move that promises to have far-reaching economic implications for both U.S. consumers and trading partners around the world. Meanwhile, Trump emphasized that the new tariffs are a necessary measure to protect American jobs and industries, calling it a sensible move.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream.
The announcement has already sparked controversy, with critics warning of a potential negative impacts on the U.S. consumers who could face higher prices on everyday goods ranging from electronics to food to clothing. Economic analysts are also expressing concern about retaliatory tariffs from trading partners, which could escalate into a broader trade war. Global markets reacted swiftly to the news, with shocking indices in Europe and Asia seeing declines amid fears of a potential trade conflict. The U.S. stock market has also followed suit, with Wall Street taking a hit after the news. The U.S. government has yet to release a detailed breakdown of which specific goods might be most affected by the new tariffs, leaving many industries in the dark as they prepare for the new changes. Trade groups are calling for clarity on how the tariffs will be implemented, especially as it pertains to goods that have already been ordered and are en route to the U.S. The timing of the announcement, just days before the tariff goes into effect, has raised questions about the administration's preparation for such a significant policy shift. Some Republican lawmakers have expressed support for the move with the hashtag Trust President Trump. For now, businesses, foreign governments, and U.S. consumers will be closely monitoring developments, bracing for what could be a major shakeup in the U.S. economy and its relationship with the rest of the world. But for now, we discuss on Lead Story. Courtney Lewis for Lead Story.
All right, there you have it. Trump and his tariffs are sweeping the world by storm. We'll hear from my guests right after this break.
All your electrical needs, visit ABC Electrical Sales. We've got everything, stocking top brands like CNCs, Philips, and Allen Bradley. We guarantee quality and reliability. Shop with us and save with even free island-wide delivery. Conditions apply. Visit us at Shop 8 Hagley Park Plaza, Kingston 10. Call 876-754-3714-5 or 876-754-3825-8. ABC Electrical Sales, for a better choice in electrical business.
People always say me and Tammy is couple goals. You are our couple goals.
Babsy says I asked Tommy to take care of Carlin family because I'm busy, and he did take care of it.
I met Winnie and she whispered in my ear and she says, I thank you for the music.
I got into an argument with him. You hear me sing my song and you copy it.
Oh, where I say Bob Marley accused Tommy Cowan to thief him song. When Uncle Tommy young in a hot boy, then Tessie, you know, auntie, me know, you know.
The Cut, brought to you by Flow.
Welcome back. You're watching Lead Story. I'm filling in for George Davis. My name is Nika Lewis, and we're talking about Trump and his tariffs, the possible implications, and the way forward. Of course, joining me in studio is developmental economist Dr. Christopher Stokes, and on Zoom we have opposition spokesman on industry, investment, and global logistics. Big title for Anthony Hilton. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us. Afternoon, Anthony.
Good evening. Good evening.
It's Christian, but
we had it wrong,
Chris.
so it's
Hey, how are you
Christian.
doing, Anthony?
We're corrected.
Hi, Tony. Yes.
Well, we'll start with Mr. Hilton. Being the politician, we're going to tackle you first. So, firstly, tell us, how do you see this move, Mr. Hilton, by President Trump playing out?
Well, first of all, the move itself is unprecedented. And really, in some sense, it's a gamble. It is, if you hear I'm at the expo and the light just came back, so you may hear some noise, if you can hear me. But
we're hearing you clearly, sir.
We're not able to say what are the long-term consequences, simply because there are so many imponderables. What I will say is that the short term carries a lot of risk for Jamaica, for the Caribbean, and indeed the entire global economy. And the longer term consequence we'll have to see. But the short term, you could see a recession, you could see stagflation, you could see a weakening global economy, which for Jamaica cannot spell well because we already have anemic growth in Jamaica, and this with a weakening global economy and a major trading partner threatening a 10%, promising a 10% tax on export to the U.S. Cannot be all positive.
Let me bring in the economist, Dr. Stokes. Trump has said that this will in some way help to boost the American economy. But since the announcement, the opposite seems to be happening. Could you tell us what do you foresee
the stock market, I presume that's what you're talking about. That will respond. It was down 3-4% today. That doesn't surprise me at all. But the U.S. has some fundamental problems. Part of the reason why Elon Musk was brought in is that the entire U.S. economy and financial system is not sustainable as currently configured. The level of debt, the persistent budget deficits, having to borrow money to finance budget, you can't keep doing that. You know, that a time will come to where you have to pay the piper. And I think that Trump is trying to find a way. He's doing what they call in the space moving fast and breaking things. We saw it with Doge. We're seeing it now with tariffs. Where I would like to think, to be generous to him, that this is a move that he thinks will bring in additional revenue to bring down the budget shortfall that they have in the U.S. and ultimately bring down the debt. That, I believe, is the thinking. I hope is the thinking. But I have to say that if it is, just from a pure economic theory point of view, it is I'm afraid, misplaced. And I don't see it working.
I heard Mr. Hilton just mention some possible implications being a recession. Are we really that dangerously positioned?
There are some things that we have been spoiled to be afraid of. One of them is a recession or bank failure and so on, because we have had bad experiences. But there is a role, I believe, for taking hard decisions today that will have consequences today, but that will put you on a the correct trajectory 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the line. And while I'm not sure that this approach is important, taking on the rickety financial infrastructure and system taking it on is important. So I think that we must not be afraid that there may be a recession this year or next year, or that there may be short-term pain. But my bigger worry is that the long arc of the strategy will not be successful.
Well, Mr. Hilton, I want to bring you back in. What steps should we as Jamaicans be taking, in light of this 10% tariff? What would you want to see the government doing?
Well, I begin by saying my sense is that the government is wholly unprepared for this. And it comes from the questions I posed in the Finance Committee in Parliament when I asked what sort of preparation is being made for this eventuality. The response came that we were not the target and we shouldn't be worried about that. The targets were people who were sending drugs into the US and people with trade surplus. Now, what we see is that even a 10% tariff on our goods across the board is problematic, because the margins on our export trade already is very thin. To have a 10% tariff with high electricity rate and the structure of the economy that we have cannot be helpful. It cannot be a positive thing at all. And it seems to me that the arrangement that should have been in place for a long time because it was obvious, is to address the issues of productivity, specifically addressing issues like energy or diversification of our industries and trade policies. All of this should have been in train a long time ago, and these are critical to the opposition strategy on growing the economy.
Yeah. So while I understand where you have tried to, well, you've looked down the barrel and you've seen some darkness, is there any hope in that tunnel? We've started out late to prepare, but can we prepare in any way at this time, given what we're facing?
Is that question for me? Because your volume has gone down.
Yes, I was asking, in light of the outlook that you have for or context and situation that we're in now, what do you think is possible for us to fix in the short to long term or medium term?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure you have any short-term policy of response. What we have to do is that the sector, the government, and their private sector partners in the U.S. have to come together to see what sort of response there can be in terms of the impact of the tariff itself and how that is going to get passed on or not to consumers. And on the Jamaican side, the producers, the government has now to engage the producers to see how some of the constraints can be addressed. And I mentioned some of what those are. Energy is a key constraint in the economy. That response, again, we're going to have to look at a number of measures to address that. But I think the government now must demonstrate that it is even somewhat prepared to respond to this impact that we know is coming.
Well, we definitely are up on a break, so we'll talk more about the implications, if any, after this break.
I always say, me and Tammy is couple goals. You are our couple goals.
Babsy says, I asked Tommy to take care of Carlin family because I'm busy. And he did take care of her.
I met Winnie and she whispered in my ear and she says, I thank you for the music.
I got into an argument with him. You hear me sing my song and you copy it.
How will I say Bob Marley accused Tommy Cowan to thief him song? When Uncle Tommy young in a hot boy named Tessie, and Tessie, auntie,
The Cut. Brought to you by Flow.
Episode 10.
Well, go on, people. We got as far as the nearest parish. We're headed to Portmore today.
Tana, Greater Portmore Tabernacle.
There's no walls to this church.
This real. This real.
Pat a pat, 2 and 2, pat plus 2, me say equal to 2. Can make the wolf and the patu.
Here we come, Celine, Road.
1 and 1, 2 and 2, 1 plus 1.
Welcome back to Lead Story. You've seen the full screen graphic there talking about Trump's tariffs, and Jamaica was slapped with a 10% tariff recently on goods going into the US. And so we are here discussing these implications and what's happening for both economies as it stands. We have development economist Dr. Christian
Stokes.
Yes. And we also have the opposition spokesman on industry and global logistics and investment, Anthony Hilton. He is online. So, Dr. Stokes, before we went to the break, we had that discussion with Mr. Hilton where he was citing some of the things that possibly could have been done by Jamaica.
Yeah. So I just want to pick up on a couple of things that our Honorable Tony said, which are important. The first is that we went through an entire budget debate without the presentation from the government on how to treat with the elephant in the room, the clear and present danger that something like this was coming. All right, and that was actually a surprise to me, having listened to the entire debate. That's the first thing. To say that we don't have a fentanyl problem, I hope that's not what they said, and Mr. Hilton can confirm, seems to me to be naive, simply because for those who are clear on what is going on, fentanyl is used to declare a national emergency, which allows the president to put up tariffs unilaterally without going through the legislative process. That's the only reason for. That explains why you're supposedly punishing Canada for fentanyl. All right. The other thing that we must come to terms with: Israel dropped everything coming from the U.S. into Israel. Israel, as of 2 days before or a day before President Trump's presentation, were 0 rated. They still got 10%. Brazil imports much more from the U.S. than it's not taken advantage. They still have 10%. One of the tragedies in all of this, by the way, is when you look at Vietnam and Bangladesh and Madagascar, who have been hit with these huge tariffs.
Closer to home is Guyana.
And Guyana, we can talk about the Guyana a little bit. But this was completely derailed these economies. They rely heavily on in the case of Madagascar, it's agriculture. In the case of Bangladesh, it's textiles. A lot of these companies put up these tariffs not because they have something against the U.S., but they need to preserve their foreign exchange. That entire thing is blown up. The entire world, the rules-based world order is blown up. The trade world order is blown up, and we will have to see what we can reconstruct in this. But in the near term, frankly, we're all going to have a problem outside of the U.S. and the U.S. itself, to be frank. My other worry, criticism, regret is that through all these years, we have not put in place the logistics center. We have not brought down the cost per kilowatt hour from 40 cents or, whatever, 30 something, 40 down to 10 and 15 cents. So that when a crisis such as this arose, Jamaica would be a viable alternative to Thailand. Or so all the Southeast Asian economies that are having these high tariffs. We're just not ready to take advantage of the situation, and that is, in my view, squarely on us. That's the first thing. The second thing is we really have to self-reflect, learn from the 70s in particular, I would say, and see, when do we really stand on our own 2 feet? And and if we're on a chair, when do we have enough legs on the chair so that we can balance ourselves? And I think we're just way too dependent for a country that is so accomplished and so proud with so many natural resources. We're giving up too much.
I'm certain that Mr. Hilton will agree with somewhat of the latter aspects of your statement. Mr. Hilton, I want you to touch on that, but before that, with the recent visit from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, do you believe that there is room for Jamaica to negotiate exemptions or even reduction in tariffs on certain goods, given our long-standing trade relationships between ourselves and the U.S.? Mr. Hilton, are you with us? Well, he did say he was at the expo, and he apparently is not with us right now. So we will throw that question to you, Mr. Stokes.
All right. So I'm and let's hope that we get back Honorable Hilton. But one must not take it personally. I think what happened is that for whatever reason, Guyana has tariffs on. In total, so it's actual tariffs, and I don't think they're going to be manipulating the exchange rates, but maybe they have rules, regulations, barriers for investments or bringing in goods and services into Guyana. The sum total of which is, if we were to follow the formula, is 76%, and therefore the U.S. saw it fit to impose a 38% tariff. So I'd be interested to see how much of that is actually hard tariffs on the sheet of paper. This is the tax you must pay at the border, versus what is imputed from maybe licensing or other restrictions in bringing things in. And let us see. And I'm hoping that certainly the relationship that they have with Chevron and what they are trying to do may not be caught up in that. I'm not sure who is on whose side, but we have to see how that evolves. But on the face of it, frankly doesn't make sense.
Another thing that doesn't quite make sense to me, after a visit of that nature by the Secretary of State, we saw him being well received, it would appear, in most of the islands he visited, and then we hear about these tariffs. Some seem to be reciprocal, as the president outlined, but others were just blanketed.
Right.
So at 10% across the board. So we seem to have received the better end of the stick.
Yeah. So we are in the sort of the baseline tariff, the new zero, which is now 10%. Okay. Right. And he came. He was. I think he was gracious. He was very forceful in Guyana. He was certainly very gracious in Jamaica. He met with other leaders while he was here. That seemed to have gone well. But we mustn't confuse ourselves, right? The U.S. put it's all over the place, but 25% on tariffs to Canada.
Yes.
All right? So if you're going to do that to your brother, I, as your neighbor or as your distant cousin, should not take comfort that I'll be spared anything, regardless of the diplomatic niceties. So I don't think we should have, we couldn't read too much into that. It comes down to business. There's a 10% on Israel, right? It's interesting to me that there's 20 on the UK and 10 on Great Britain, but there's a lot of history there, of course. But I don't believe that there's a scenario in which, Jamaica is doing everything that we say, let's let them off the hook. They need the money. They need to raise the money, and this administration sees trade imbalances as taking advantage of them, not realizing that, in fact, they are the ones who benefit.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately all the time we have to discuss this matter. Certainly something to continue looking and speaking about. But that's it for Lead Story this evening. I'm Nika Lewis. My guest in studio is Dr. Christian Stokes, economist. And we were online earlier with opposition spokesman on industry, investment and global logistics, Anthony Hilton. That's all the time we have. So I see you at the top of the hour with the news.
People, we now waste no time.
I am super excited to be on for another season to show you the holy road.
Listen, new adventures. Slim, get fluffy. That's cool, let's go. We're not going out, Things are only getting hotter and hotter this season.
Click, pow, that must tell you something.
There's a great story happening just in our backyard. We